I watched my son stand at the podium in my own living room, the living room of a house he did not know I owned, and lie to 15 investors about the millions he had stolen from me. He smiled his father's smile. He used my name as collateral. He called me a confused old woman who barely spoke English. What he did not know was that I spoke perfect English. I had for 43 years, and tonight I had brought the evidence to destroy him. I had never planned to use it until Thanksgiving. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to that evening, to the moment I walked through my own front door. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were not who you thought? Yes or no is enough. Your presence here means more than you know. A quick note. Certain details are fictionalized for emotional impact, but the lesson at its heart is what truly matters. I carried my homemade bung through the front door of a house I secretly own, and my daughter-in-law directed me to the servants' table. The foyer blazed with light and the chatter of strangers. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's glow, refracting tiny rainbows across the walls I had chosen 12 years ago. I stood there at barely 5'2", my silver-streaked black hair pinned back simply, holding a warm container against my roughened palms. 70 years of life had taught me to read a room in seconds. This room told me I was not welcome. "Mom, you made it!" My son's voice floated over the crowd. Derek Holloway, 42 years old, stood tall in his tailored sport coat, his Harvard class ring catching the light as he waved vaguely in my direction. The perfect image of success that my sacrifice had purchased, dollar by dollar, year by year. He did not cross the room to greet me. He did not take the bun from my hands. He turned back to a cluster of men in expensive suits and laughed at something one of them said. "I brought bung," I called out. "Your father's recipe." "Great. Mom, Vivian will show you where to sit." Vivian appeared at my elbow like she had been waiting for this moment. My daughter-in-law, 38, had angled her highlighted hair and designer dress for maximum impact. Everything about her was curated for her 80,000 Instagram followers, for the investors crowding my dining room, for everyone except the woman who had raised her husband. "Pearl, let me take that." She reached for the container, but did not actually lift it from my hands. "You'll be more comfortable over here." I followed her past the mahogany dining table, the one Eugene and I had bought at an estate sale in 1987, the one I had refinished myself. 12 place settings gleamed under the chandelier. 12 name cards stood at attention beside 12 crystal glasses. I counted the faces as we walked investors, partners, strangers. Not a single chair held someone who shared my blood. When did my son learn to look through me like I was furniture? Vivian guided me through the kitchen doorway and stopped beside a small folding table pushed against the wall. One metal chair, one paper napkin, a child's plastic cup filled with water. "The main table is for business guests tonight," she said, her smile never wavering. "You understand. The noise won't bother you as much back here, and you'll be closer to the kitchen if you need anything." "I see." 2 words. I gave her only 2 words because more would have revealed too much. I set my bang on the folding table, the container my husband Eugene had always said held 100 memories in every batch. The smell of coconut and mung bean rose up, mixing with the roasted turkey and expensive cologne drifting from the other room. No one would eat my food tonight. I knew that already. Vivian disappeared back to her guests, and I lowered myself onto the metal chair. It creaked under my weight. It controlled through my good black slacks. I smoothed my hands on my knees and looked around at my exile. 43 years in America, and this is where I sit. Through the doorway, I could see the main table. Laughter erupted, the sharp, performing kind that men make when money is on the table. Derek stood at the head, gesturing expansively, selling something. He had always been good at selling things. His smile, his ideas, his mother's trust. A champagne cork popped. Someone applauded, the sound of wealth congratulating itself. I studied each investor's face, memorizing them the way I had once memorized the faces of border guards and customs officials. These men had clean hands and easy smiles. They did not know hunger. They did not know what it meant to build something from nothing. But I knew them. I knew their type in every language. A shadow moved in my peripheral vision. I turned and found my granddaughter watching from the hallway. Serena Holloway, 19 years old. Hovered near the doorway in her college sweatshirt. She had my eyes the keen, watchful eyes I had brought from Vietnam. Eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. Our gazes locked. Her expression shifted, and I recognized what I saw there. Shame that was not her own to carry. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then looked away. She walked toward the main table and did not look back. I understood. She was young. She still needed her parents' approval, their money, their love. I did not blame her for choosing them over me. Not yet. I built this. I own this. And tonight, I am invisible in it. From my metal chair, I could see through the study door. The property deed hung framed on the wall, positioned where Derek's guests would notice it. Proof of his success, his stability, his worth. I had given him that house. I had signed my name on the mortgage when his credit score was too damaged to qualify. I had made every payment for 12 years while he built his business, and I had never asked for repayment. My signature. My name. This house belonged to me. And my son had just seated me at the servants' table without a second thought. I folded my hands in my lap and watched the party continue without me. The band grew cold, the investors laughed, and I began, very quietly, to pay attention. The ring light clicked on, and my daughter-in-law began performing for 80,000 strangers while I sat invisible 6 meters away. I had been watching the party from my exile table, cataloging every glance that passed over me without seeing, every laugh that did not include me. But when Vivian positioned herself in front of the fireplace with her phone mounted on a tripod, something shifted. The performance was no longer just for the investors. Now it was for the world. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours, Vivian cooed into the camera. She panned slowly across the dining room, capturing the chandelier, the mahogany table, the crystal glasses catching light. We're so blessed to have everyone together tonight. The notification sounds pinged like tiny bells. Hearts floated up the screen. Comments scrolled faster than I could read from my distance, but I caught fragments. Beautiful home. Goals. Where's the mother-in-law? Vivian saw that last one too. Her smile tightened for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. Oh, she's resting near the kitchen, she said. Her voice sweet as honey poured over broken glass. Not really comfortable with large gatherings. You know how it is with the older generation. They get tired so easily at big events. I watched Derek standing 3 feet from his wife. He heard every word. He said nothing. His hand wrapped around his wine glass, and I saw it. The slight tremor in his fingers. The same tell he had shown at 14 when lying about his report card. You want to know what invisibility feels like? It feels like your own son watching his wife mock you and saying nothing. I rose from the folding chair. No one noticed. I walked past the kitchen, past the laughing investors, past my son, who did not turn his head. The stairs to the second floor were empty, and I climbed them slowly, letting my hand trail along the banister I had helped Eugene install in 2013. The guest room was dark and cold. I had left my coat here earlier, draped across the bed. I would collect it. Call a taxi. Return to my small house in Houston Heights, where no one seated me at servants' tables or explained my absence to 80,000 strangers. My hand found the coat pocket. My fingers touched paper. I pulled out a folded sheet, crisp and white, still warm from a printer. Someone had stuffed it here carelessly. Or someone had wanted me to find it. Either way, it was in my hands now. The letterhead read, First Texas Commercial Bank. The subject line read, RE Loan Extension Request, Rose Garden Holdings, LLC. I moved closer to the window where the streetlight gave me enough glow to read. The paper was sharp against my fingers. Edges still factory clean. My eyes scanned the paragraphs, catching phrases that made my stomach turn. Request for extension on the $1,800,000 commercial loan. Guarantor Pearl Holloway. 2847 Yale Street, Houston Heights. Collateral properties to be verified. Rose Garden Holdings. My name. My address. But not my signature. I turned the paper over. In the margins, someone had scrawled calculations in blue ink, interest payments, principal schedules. A note that read, "Needs 6 more months. Tell bank she approved." I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards, on homework assignments, on the thank you note Derek wrote when I co-signed his first business loan 15 years ago. The paper was still warm from the printer. Someone had left it here by accident, or someone wanted me to find it. I stood very still in the dark guest room. Below me, the party continued. Vivian's laughter drifted up through the floorboards, performing joy for strangers who would never sit at her table either. Derek's voice rose and fell, pitching something to his investors, selling them a future built on foundations I was only beginning to understand. $1.8 million. I had co-signed loans for Derek before, small ones, legitimate ones, repaid on time with interest. But this was different. This was a company I had never heard of, a signature I had never given, a debt that now sat against my name like a stone around my neck. 43 years I built businesses in this country. I know what fraud looks like. I was staring at it. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my purse. Then I sat on the edge of the guest bed and did what I had done every time life tried to break me. I thought, Rose Garden Holdings, LLC, guarantor, Pearl Holloway. Loan amount, $1,800,000. I had never heard of this company. I had never signed these papers. But my son's handwriting filled the margins. Calculating interest, planning timelines, writing notes about telling the bank I had approved. The numbers swam before my eyes. $1.8 million was enormous, but something told me it was not the whole picture. Derek's hand had trembled on that wine glass. Vivian's smile had cracked for just a moment. They were not nervous about one loan. They were nervous about something bigger. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to call someone who would tell me the truth. My phone sat heavy in my purse, and I already knew whose number I would dial. My phone buzzed against the cold side table, Constance's name on the screen, and she never called on holidays unless something was burning. I still held the loan document in my other hand, the paper crinkling as I reached for the phone. The $1. $8 million figure had been shock enough, but Constance Mercer, 72 years old, former immigration attorney turned bank compliance consultant, did not call on Thanksgiving to discuss small numbers. She had been my closest friend since 1983, when she helped me file the paperwork that made my nail salon empire legal. If she was calling now, the fire was already out of control. "Pearl," her voice crackled with urgency. "Are you somewhere you can talk?" "Tôi đang ở nhà nó," I whispered. "I am at his house." Constance understood Vietnamese from 4 decades of friendship. She paused, and I heard her exhale. "Then listen carefully. First Texas Commercial Bank flagged a loan for fraud investigation this morning. A large one. Your name is on it as guarantor." My fingers tightened on the phone. "How large?" $4.5 million. The number hung in the air between us. Downstairs. I could hear the party continuing. Laughter, champagne corks, Vivian's performative voice entertaining her followers. $4.5 million. Added to the document in my hand.
That made over $6 million in loans I had never authorized.
"Did you know?" Constance asked. "I just found a different document. $1.8 million. Different loan. Same company." Silence. Then, Rose Garden Holdings, LLC. "Yes. How do you explain to a friend of 40 years that your only son has stolen your name?" "Send me everything you have," Constance said. "I'll pull the full file from my bank contacts. You'll have it by morning." "Pearl." She hesitated. "This is systematic. Multiple loans, multiple dates. Someone has been doing this for at least 18 months. 18 months. I thought of Derek's hand trembling on the wine glass. I thought of Vivienne's careful smile. I thought of the investors crowding my dining room, men in expensive suits being sold promises built on my stolen signature. "I understand," I said. "Do you want me to come there?" "No, stay where you are. I will handle this." I ended the call and sat in the darkness, the phone cooling against my palm. The turkey smell drifted up from downstairs, mixing with the faint scent of champagne and expensive cologne. My stomach turned. In 1982, Derek fit in a laundry basket. In 2025, he needed millions of my credit to cover his failures. The memory rose unbidden, the way memories do when the present becomes too heavy to hold. I closed my eyes and let it come. Houston, 1982. A nail salon no bigger than a storage closet. 12 square meters of fluorescent lights and chemical fumes. Eugene stood at the back station, his builder's hand stained with nail polish remover, cradling our infant son between clients. Eugene Holloway, my husband, the man who had carried me across 3 borders and 2 oceans to reach this tiny shop in a Texas strip mall. His hands had built houses in Vietnam before the war took everything. Now those same hands held cotton balls and acetone, filing American women's nails for $3 a session. "We build this so he has a better life than us," Eugene said, nodding at the baby sleeping in his basket. Derek's face was peaceful, unaware of the 14-hour days his parents worked, unaware of the dreams being planted in soil made of sacrifice. "A better life doesn't mean forgetting where you came from," I replied. I was 26 then, still young enough to believe my words would shape my son. Eugene smiled, the tired smile of a man who worked too hard to argue. "He will understand someday. He will be grateful." But even then, something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of doubt. A fear he never spoke aloud but carried with him until the cancer took him 3 years ago. Eugene planted a garden. I watered it for 40 years. And our son burned it for kindling. The memory faded Eugene's hands rough from acetone, his voice soft with hope for our son, the smell of nail polish and exhaustion filling that tiny salon. I opened my eyes in the guest room of the house I owned, holding proof of the theft my husband had somehow predicted. My grief could wait. First, I needed the full file. I photographed the document with my phone, steady hands despite everything. I emailed it to Constance with 3 words, "Add this one." Then I folded the paper and slipped it back into my purse, next to the phone that would soon deliver the complete accounting of my son's betrayal. Downstairs, the party was winding down. Car doors slammed in the driveway. Vivian's voice rose in artificial farewell, thanking guests for coming, promising follow-up meetings. Derek's voice rumbled beneath hers, confident and charming, selling the next phase of whatever scheme he had built on my bones. I stood at the guest room window and watched the investors' taillights disappear down Magnolia Lane. 12 men and women who had spent Thanksgiving in my house without knowing it. 12 potential victims of whatever fraud my son was running. 12 reasons this could not be handled quietly within the family. Constance would have the file by morning, and I would know exactly how deep the betrayal ran. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass. 70 years old, 5'2", silver-streaked hair pinned back simply. I did not look like a woman who could destroy her own son. But I had not looked like a woman who could build a $25 million empire either. Appearances, I had learned, meant nothing. 47 pages loaded on my phone screen, and each one was a knife my son had sharpened with my name. Constance's email had arrived at 9:03 p.m., while the party downstairs was finally dying. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and began to read with the precision of someone who has signed hundreds of business contracts over 43 years. The fluorescent glow of the screen illuminated documents I had never seen, signatures I had never made, debts I had never authorized. Rose Garden Holdings, LLC. Registered 14 months ago. Business address 2847 Yale Street, Houston Heights, my home. Registered agent Pearl Holloway. I had never heard of this company until tonight, but according to the state of Texas, I had created it. I scrolled through bank statements, loan applications, collateral agreements. The structure emerged slowly, like a blueprint for betrayal. Derek had built an entire shell company using my identity as the foundation. Every signature was mine, or rather, every signature was meant to look like mine. He had studied my handwriting well enough to fool banks, but not well enough to fool me. The money trail told its own story. Over $1 million to cover old business debts from projects I had never known were failing. Nearly $2 million funneled into a warehouse development that existed only on paper. No permits filed, no ground broken, no contractors hired. The rest had vanished into accounts I couldn't trace, but I could guess their destination. My son needed millions of dollars, and he decided the easiest person to steal from was his mother. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes. The number swam behind my closed lids. He hadn't just borrowed money. He hadn't just forged signatures. He had constructed a legal trap that made me responsible for his crimes. If this collapsed, when this collapsed, I would be the one holding the debt. I would be the one explaining to federal investigators why my name appeared on fraudulent loan applications. He didn't just steal from me, he made me the criminal on paper. A soft knock interrupted my calculations. I looked up as the door cracked open and Serena slipped inside. Her face was pale in the dim light, tear tracks visible on her cheeks. She held her phone in both hands like it might explode. "Banoy," she whispered. "Grandmother, I need to show you something." She crossed the room and sat beside me on the bed. Her hands trembled as she pulled up an audio file on her phone. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago. "I recorded him talking to someone," she said. "I didn't understand what it meant at first, but I knew it felt wrong." "What do you say to a 19-year-old who just handed you proof that her father is a thief?" I said nothing. I just nodded for her to play it. Derek's voice filled the guest room, tinny through the phone speaker but unmistakably his. Confident, casual. The voice of a man who believed he was untouchable. "The signatures are close enough. She hasn't noticed in 18 months. A pause. Another voice murmured something indistinct. Then Derek again. "She's old. She doesn't check accounts. 6 more months and we're clear." "She's old. She doesn't check accounts." I listened to my son dismiss me in 8 words. 8 words that reduced 43 years of business acumen. 28 nail salons, commercial properties across Houston, and a net worth he had never bothered to calculate reduced all of it to an old woman who didn't pay attention. The recording ended. Serena stared at her phone, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I misunderstood." "You didn't misunderstand." She looked up then, and I saw Eugene in her eyes. The same sharp intelligence, the same moral clarity that had made my husband the only man I ever trusted completely. Derek had inherited Eugene's charm, but none of his integrity. Serena had inherited everything that mattered. She was shaking, this brave girl, betraying her own blood to protect mine. Eugene would have been proud of her. I pulled her into my arms and held her the way I had held her father once, a lifetime ago, when he was small enough to fit in a laundry basket and innocent enough to deserve my protection. "You did the right thing," I whispered against her hair. She smelled of her mother's expensive perfume, but her heart was nothing like Vivian's. "Send me that recording. Then go back to your room. Let me handle this." "What are you going to do?" "What I have always done. Protect what is mine." She nodded and slipped out as quietly as she had come. I listened to her footsteps fade down the hallway, then turned back to my phone. 47 pages of theft, one recording that could end my son's freedom, evidence enough to destroy him 10 times over. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry for the boy Derek used to be, for the infant sleeping in a laundry basket while his parents built an empire with their bare hands, for the toddler who had reached for me with complete trust, for the man I had hoped he would become. 5 minutes, no more. Then I dried my eyes, opened a fresh note on my phone, and began to plan. At 10:47 p.m., I pulled a hotel notepad from my purse and began writing the plan that would destroy my son's empire, the same way I once wrote plans, to build my own. The 5 minutes of grief had passed. My tears had dried on my cheeks, leaving salt tracks I would wash away later. For now, I sat at the small desk in the guest room, a single lamp casting yellow light across the notepad's blank pages. Below me, the house had finally fallen silent. The investors had gone home. Vivian had stopped performing. Derek had retreated to wherever guilty men go when they think no one is watching. I clicked my pen and began to write. This was how I had always worked. Paper and pen, not computers. Lists and timelines, not spreadsheets. When Eugene and I opened our first nail salon in 1982, I wrote the business plan on a legal pad stolen from an immigration office. When we expanded to 5 locations, I mapped the strategy on napkins. When we reached 28 salons and began acquiring commercial properties, I still kept a notepad in my purse. ready to capture any opportunity that crossed my path. I had opened 28 nail salons with nothing but a notepad and nerve. Closing one fraudulent son would take the same tools. Step 1. I wrote, confirm the signatures are forged. I needed proof that would hold up beyond my own recognition. The bank documents showed signatures that tilted the wrong way, formed with the wrong pressure. But I needed something to compare them against, something recent, something Derek would sign without thinking. A health club membership form, a simple document requesting my name as sponsor. He would scribble his signature and never realize he was handing me evidence. Step 2. Identify the Saturday guests. Constance had mentioned something in passing during our call, a bank investigator who had been asking questions about Rose Garden Holdings. If that investigator was planning to attend Derek's Saturday party, I needed to know. The guest list was my battlefield. I needed to understand every player before I made my move. Step 3. Saturday. I paused, pen hovering over the paper. Saturday was 2 days away. Derek was hosting another gathering, not Thanksgiving's Intimate 12, but a larger event, an investor showcase for his warehouse project. The same warehouse that existed only on paper, funded by money stolen from me. Did he think I survived 43 years in America by being careless? By not reading documents? By trusting blindly? I had read every contract I ever signed. I had questioned every number that seemed wrong. I had built a $25 million portfolio by paying attention when others assumed I didn't understand. My son had watched me do this his entire life, and still he thought I wouldn't notice when he stole from me. The insult burned hotter than the theft. I continued writing, my handwriting neat and precise. Step 4. Prepare the documents for presentation. Yep, coordinate with Constance on timing. Step 6. Decide what to do about Serena. My pen paused again at my granddaughter's name. She had given me the recording. She had chosen me over her father. That choice would cost her perhaps her college tuition, certainly her relationship with Derek, possibly her entire family structure. I needed to protect her from the fallout, but I also needed her evidence. I added a note, keep Serena's involvement hidden until necessary. The clock on my phone showed 11:23 p.m. I had been writing for over half an hour, and the plan had filled 3 pages. Each step connected to the next, like links in a chain. Each contingency accounted for, each weakness identified and addressed. This was not revenge. Revenge was hot and reckless. This was strategy cold, methodical, patient. The same strategy that had taken me from a 12-square-meter nail salon to properties across Houston. The same strategy that had let me survive when others failed. The house creaked as it settled into the night. Distant traffic hummed on the streets beyond the garden. I could smell ink from my pen, the faint mustiness of the guest room, the lingering traces of expensive cologne from the party below. I wrote one final line at the bottom of the page Saturday. The audience will already be assembled. Use it. Saturday. 2 days. 50 hours to prepare. I underlined it twice the way I underlined opening dates for every salon that made me rich. Derek had spent months building his fraud. He had forged signatures, created shell companies, deceived banks and investors. He had assembled an elaborate stage for his performance, complete with audience and props and lighting. I would let him finish building that stage. I would let him invite his audience, polish his pitch, believe himself untouchable. And then, at the moment of his greatest confidence, I would walk onto that stage and burn it down. I folded the 3 pages carefully and slipped them into my bra, the safest place I knew, where I had kept emergency cash since 1982. The paper was warm against my skin, a secret held close to my heart. The plan was ready. The countdown had begun. I turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness, listening to the house that belonged to me, occupied by a son who had forgotten that fact. 2 more days of pretending to be the confused old woman he thought I was. 2 more days of watching, listening, gathering. Then Saturday would come, and Derek would learn what happened when you stole from Pearl Holloway. I handed my son a health club membership form over breakfast, and he signed it without reading a single word, exactly as I had planned. Friday morning arrived with pale November light filtering through the dining room windows. I had slept poorly in the guest room. the folded pages of my plan pressing against my skin all night. But I rose early, dressed in my simplest clothes, and descended the stairs before anyone else was awake. Derek found me at the breakfast table an hour later, nursing cold coffee and pretending to struggle with paperwork. "Mom, what are you doing up so early?" I couldn't sleep. I held up the form I had printed the night before. "Can you sign this for me? My hand is shaking today." He crossed to the table, already reaching for his pen. The perfect son. So helpful, so accommodating when it cost him nothing. "Sure, Mom. What is it?" "Health club membership. The girl at the desk said you could witness." Derek scrawled his signature without a glance at the document. He didn't ask which health club. He didn't notice that the form was generic, downloaded from the internet and filled in by hand. He simply signed, patted my shoulder, and wandered off to make himself an espresso. I waited until I heard the coffee machine whir to life. Then I pulled the bank guarantee documents from my purse, the ones Constance had sent, the ones with my name forged across the bottom, and laid them beside the fresh signature. My signature tilts 15 degrees to the right. It has since 2019, when the arthritis settled into my knuckles. The bank signatures were perfectly straight. Someone had traced my name from an old document, copying the letters but not the angle. Someone had practiced my signature until they could reproduce it on command. Someone who knew my handwriting intimately. Someone who had watched me sign documents for 40 years. Did he practice my signature at his desk? Did he feel anything when he forged his mother's name for the first time? I photographed both signatures with my phone and sent them to Constance with no message. She would understand. Then I folded the papers back into my purse and returned to my cold coffee. The picture of a confused old woman overwhelmed by simple paperwork. Serena passed through the kitchen at 10, dressed for a run. Our eyes met briefly. She paused, opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it. I gave her the smallest nod. Not yet, not here. She understood, and she left without a word. At noon, Derek found me again. This time, his approach was different. He sat across from me at the dining table, his posture too casual, his smile too wide. He carried a folder thick with documents. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something." He slid the folder across the table. "A family business opportunity. Great returns, 12% guaranteed. I just need your signature on a few papers." I opened the folder slowly, as if the words on the page were difficult for me to parse. But I read quickly, absorbing the details in seconds. A credit extension request. $2.5 million secured against my properties. My name printed as primary guarantor. He was asking me to sign away another piece of my empire, while I sat at his table, in the house I owned. "This is a lot of money," I said, keeping my voice uncertain. $2.5 million is a lot. "It's a great opportunity. Mom, you don't need to understand all the details. Just sign here, here, and here." He tapped the pages impatiently. "Let me read it tonight. I want to understand before I sign." Derek's jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw something flash in his eyes. Not anger, not yet, but something close. Frustration. Fear. "The deadline is Monday," he said. "Don't overthink this. Then I have the weekend to read." "Mom." "Derek." I looked up at him, holding his gaze. "I am not signing something I haven't read. You know I never do." The silence stretched between us. I watched him calculate. Could he pressure me further? Would it be suspicious? How much did the confused old woman actually understand? He decided to retreat. "Fine." He stood, gathering his folder. "Read it tonight, but I need your answer by Saturday morning, before the party. This deal closes Monday." "I understand." He walked away with his fists clenched. My son, my only child. The boy I once carried sleeping from the nail salon to our car. His small body warm against my chest, his breath soft on my neck. I watched Derek disappear into his study, shoulders rigid with barely contained rage. He thought I was a confused old woman who needed time to understand simple paperwork. He had no idea I understood it perfectly and that the signature comparison in my pocket proved he was a forger. The deadline was Monday. That meant his entire scheme depended on my compliance, without my signature. The new loans wouldn't process. Without the new loans, the old loans would come due. Without fresh money to cover the gaps, everything would collapse. My son had built a house of cards with my name on every one, and now he needed me to add more cards before the whole structure fell. I took a sip of my cold coffee and smiled. The trap was set. Saturday was tomorrow. And Derek had no idea what was coming. 8 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and endings, my husband signed a will that would save me from our son. The memories surfaced as I sat in the guest room that Friday afternoon, the forged signatures still warm in my purse. I had proof now, undeniable. Forensic proof that Derek had stolen from me. But before I could act, I needed to remember why Eugene had seen this coming long before I did. The hospital room had been small and cold. Machines beeped their steady rhythm. Eugene lay propped against pillows, his builder's hands now thin and trembling, his eyes still sharp with the intelligence that had helped us survive 3 countries and build a life from nothing. The lawyer had just finished reading the will. Everything to me. Every property, every account, every dollar we had earned together over 40 years. Nothing directly to Derek. Our son stood by the window, his Harvard tie loosened, his face flushed with something between anger and disbelief. "Dad, this isn't fair," Derek said. "I'm your son." Eugene looked at him for a long moment. The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed at something. Life continued outside that room while death waited patiently inside it. "I trust her to know where this money came from," Eugene said finally. "You don't." Eugene knew. 8 years before Derek forged my signature, my husband looked at our son and saw the thief he would become. Derek left the room without another word. I stayed beside Eugene's bed, holding his thin hand, watching his chest rise and fall. "He will try to take it someday," Eugene whispered to me. "Don't let him." Those were among his last words. 3 days later, he was gone. I had carried that warning for 8 years, hoping it was the paranoia of a dying man, hoping Derek would prove his father wrong, hoping the son we raised would remember the laundry basket, the nail salon, the 14-hour days that built his privilege. He had proven nothing except Eugene's prophecy. I shook off the memory and checked my phone. Constance had texted, "Café Brazil, 3 p.m., important intel." I slipped out of the house without telling anyone where I was going. Café Brazil sat in the heart of Montrose, a neighborhood I had known since before it was fashionable. Constance was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a folder thick enough to break a spine. She looked up as I approached, 72 years old, silver hair cut short and practical, eyes that had seen every immigration scam and financial fraud Houston could produce. My oldest friend. The woman who had helped me file the paperwork that made my first nail salon legal. 40 years ago, in a cramped office that smelled of coffee and hope. Now she was helping me file evidence that would send my son to prison. "I ordered you Vietnamese coffee," she said. "Sit down. You need to see this." Constance slid the folder across the table like a general presenting battle plans. We were 2 old women in a coffee shop, and we were about to destroy a Harvard MBA. "Everything's in here," she said. 47 pages, plus some new findings. "But that's not why I called you." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. A guest list. Names I didn't recognize, except for one circled in red ink. "Thornton Caldwell," Constance said. "VP of Credit Risk at First Texas Commercial Bank. He's been investigating your son's loan applications for 3 months." I looked at the name. He's on Derek's guest list for Saturday. Listed as a potential investor. Derek has no idea who he really is. Constance smiled. The same smile she had worn when she helped me outmaneuver a landlord who tried to cancel my lease in 1989. Caldwell accepted the invitation. He's investigating from the inside. Does Derek suspect? No. He thinks Caldwell is just another wealthy mark ready to hand over money for his warehouse project. I sipped my coffee. It was strong and bitter, the way I had drunk it since 1982. Outside the cafe window, Houston traffic crawled past in the afternoon heat. Inside, 2 women planned the destruction of a fraud scheme while jazz played softly from the speakers. Saturday, an audience of investors. A bank investigator in the room. And Derek would hand me the microphone himself when he asked me to endorse his fraud in front of everyone. The pieces were falling into place. All I had to do was let Derek build his stage, invite his audience, and deliver his pitch. Then I would walk onto that stage and burn it down, with an official witness watching. Saturday, I said. Constance nodded. Saturday. I finished my coffee and looked at my oldest friend, my co-conspirator. The woman who had helped me file immigration papers 40 years ago and was now helping me file evidence of my son's crimes. She had never judged me. She had never told me what to do. She had simply provided information and let me make my own choices, the way she always had. I'll let him build his stage, I said. Then I'll burn it down with everyone watching. Constance smiled. That's the Pearl I remember. I gathered my purse and stood. Saturday was tomorrow. Derek would try something tonight. I could feel it. The desperation in his clenched fists, the deadline pressing against him. But I was ready. Eugene had warned me, and I had never let my husband down. Derek stepped into the hallway and blocked my path to the guest room, and I knew the guilt offensive was about to begin. I had returned from Café Brazil with Constance's intelligence still fresh in my mind. The bank investigator, the Saturday party, the trap closing around my son. But Derek didn't know any of that. To him, I was still just a confused old woman who needed to be managed. Mom, we need to talk. He positioned himself between me and the stairs, his broad shoulders filling the narrow space. The hallway light cast shadows under his eyes. He looked tired. He looked desperate. He looked like a man whose empire was crumbling. I went to Harvard for you, Mom. His voice cracked with practiced emotion. Everything I've done has been to make this family proud. Dad understood that. He believed in me. I said nothing. I let him speak. You never believed in me the way Dad did. Derek stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming in the confined space. You always thought I would fail. Every time I asked for help, you made me feel like a disappointment. Well, I'm not a disappointment. I built something. I'm building something bigger. All I need is for you to trust me. He used to fold towels at the salon after school. He used to fall asleep in the back room while we worked. That boy would never have forged my name. But that boy was gone. Just sign the paper, he said. Let me prove myself. Let me make you proud. I looked at my son, 42 years old, Harvard educated, standing in a hallway of a house that belonged to me, asking me to sign away millions more while wearing guilt like a weapon. I need to sleep on it, I said. Good night, Derek. I stepped around him before he could respond. I felt his eyes on my back as I climbed the stairs. I did not turn around. In the guest room, I locked the door and sat on the bed. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. The guilt had not worked because guilt requires doubt, and I had none left. I changed into my nightgown and lay down, but I did not sleep. I listened to the house settle around me, the creak of floorboards, the hum of the heating system, the distant sound of Derek's voice rising and falling from somewhere below. He was on the phone. I could not hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Urgent, angry, afraid. Did Vivian know? Had she been complicit all along? Or was she just another person Derek had lied to? I closed my eyes and waited for morning. I learned later what happened in the hours I slept. Vivian could not sleep either. She told me this months afterward, when everything was over and she needed someone to confess to. That Friday night, she had lain awake beside a husband who had stopped pretending to love her years ago. When Derek left the bedroom to make his phone call, she followed. She stood in the dark hallway outside his study, her bare feet cold on the hardwood, her phone clutched in her hand out of habit. Through the closed door, she heard her husband's voice. The old woman hasn't signed yet. I'm working on it. The old woman. That's what my son called me when he thought no one was listening. Not my mother, not Mom. The old woman. If the bank calls the margin Monday, we're finished. Derek continued. Everything. The house, the business, the investments, all of it. I need that signature before Saturday's party or this whole thing collapses. Vivian pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. She had known things were bad. She had not known things were this bad. She had believed Derek when he said the loans were temporary, that the returns would come, that Pearl's money was just a bridge to something bigger. She had not known he was calling his mother the old woman and planning to take everything. "I'll get her to sign," Derek said. "She's old, she's confused. She'll do what I tell her." Vivian reached for her phone. Her first instinct was to text Pearl to warn her, to apologize, to do something. But she stopped herself. Not yet. She needed to think. She needed to understand exactly how deep this hole went before she decided which side to fall on. She returned to the bedroom and pretended to be asleep when Derek came back an hour later. He slid under the covers without touching her. He did not know she had heard everything. Tomorrow was Saturday. Vivian had a decision to make. I did not know any of this as I lay in the guest room, listening to the house grow quiet. I only knew that my son had tried to manipulate me with guilt and failed. I only knew that Saturday was coming and my plan was ready. But somewhere in that dark house, another woman was waking up to the truth about the man we both thought we knew. 2 women, 1 house, 1 target. Saturday would bring us together in ways neither of us expected. Saturday morning arrived, and I dressed for war. My fingers were steady on the navy blouse buttons, the same shade I had worn the day I signed my first American business contract in 1987. Pearl earrings Eugene gave me on our 40th anniversary clicked softly as I fastened them. In the mirror, I saw a 70-year-old woman in simple clothes. I saw a weapon disguised as a grandmother. I packed my leather portfolio with the evidence Constance had compiled. 47 pages of fraud. Signature comparisons proving forgery. Serena's recording transferred to a USB drive small enough to hide in my palm. Everything I needed to end my son's empire. Before leaving, I paused at Eugene's photograph on my dresser. "I know what you would say, old man, that he is still our son." I touched the cold glass. "But he stopped being your son when he forged your signature." 1976, Saigon falling. 17-year-old Pearl clutching forged documents that would save her family's lives. I knew then paper lies can save you or destroy you. It depends on whose hands hold the pen. I drove to River Oaks with the portfolio beside me like a passenger. The party was already buzzing when I arrived. 15 investors in summer suits filled the living room I secretly owned, champagne flutes catching the afternoon light. Waiters circulated with silver trays. Derek worked the center of the room, gesturing at presentation boards that showed glossy renderings of buildings that would never exist. 18 million in projected returns, I heard him say. Mixed-use development, premium tenants already lined up. He had Eugene's smile, but none of Eugene's soul. Vivian intercepted me at the entrance before I could blend into the crowd. Her face was pale, shadows dark beneath her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for my arm. "You came," she said, her voice strained. "Did you think I would miss my son's party?" Her eyes darted toward Derek, then back to me. She leaned closer, dropping her voice to barely a whisper. "May, I heard him. Last night. On the phone." I kept my expression neutral. "Then you know." "I didn't," she swallowed. "I didn't know it was this bad. The things he said about you, the money, all of it." The champagne tastes like copper. Or perhaps that is just what betrayal tastes like when your own blood serves it to you in crystal flutes. I studied my daughter-in-law's face, the fear, the guilt, the desperate hope that someone would tell her what to do. She had spent years performing the role of perfect wife while her husband built a house of cards. Now she was watching it collapse and trying to decide which side to fall on. "Stay close to Serena," I said quietly. "When this is over, she will need her mother." Vivian nodded and retreated into the crowd. I scanned the room the way I had learned in Saigon, watching for informants, for danger, for the small tells that reveal true intentions. Investors clustered around Derek's presentation boards. Wives compared jewelry and laughed too loudly. Everyone performed their roles perfectly, except one man. He stood near the bar in an understated gray suit, quality fabric, but deliberately unremarkable. He held a champagne glass he had not touched. His eyes moved methodically across the room, cataloging faces, noting conversations, tracking Derek's movements with the patience of a hunter. Thornton Caldwell, 45 years old, I later learned. VP of Credit Risk at First Texas Commercial Bank. He had been investigating my son's loan applications for months. And Derek had invited him to this party as a potential investor without ever knowing who he really was. I approached the bar and ordered sparkling water. He ordered the same. "You are not here for the investment opportunity," I said, keeping my voice low enough that only he could hear. He turned to face me. His eyes held 45 years of careful assessment, the look of a man who audits fraud for a living and has learned to trust no one until the evidence confirms his suspicions. Neither are you, Mrs. Holloway. In 43 years of American life, I have learned that justice is not given. It is built, brick by brick, ally by ally, document by document. Thornton Caldwell was the brick I needed. "I have evidence," I said. 47 pages, forged signatures, a recording of my son admitting the fraud. Caldwell's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest. Validation. Chief that an insider had finally come forward. "Then we should talk," he said. "After." I was hoping you would say that. We clinked our sparkling water glasses in a toast no one else would understand. Around us, the party continued. Champagne flowing, Derek charming. Investors nodding at promises built on stolen money. Derek chose that moment to turn from his cluster of admirers. His eyes found me first, standing at the bar. His confused old mother who couldn't navigate large gatherings. Then his gaze shifted to the man beside me. A man he didn't recognize. A man standing too close, speaking too quietly. Derek's smile flickered. For one heartbeat, something crossed his face. Not suspicion, not yet, but awareness. The first crack in his certainty. For the first time since I arrived, my son looked at me and saw something other than an obstacle. He saw a threat. Derek's grip on my elbow was tight enough to bruise as he steered me toward the study, away from his investors and the man in the gray suit whose name he did not know. The study door clicked shut behind us. Derek released my arm and turned to face me, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. On the desk between us, he spread 3 documents.
Loan guarantees, bearing signatures that looked like mine.
"You signed these, Mom." His voice was controlled but sharp. "Don't pretend you forgot." I looked at the papers without touching them. The signatures were good, close enough to fool a bank officer who had never watched me write, but they were not mine. "I did not sign these. The bank has your signature on file. These match." "They match an old signature." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I had taken yesterday, my signature on the health club form Derek himself had witnessed. My signature tilts 11 degrees to the right now. It has since the arthritis settled into my knuckles. These bank signatures are perfectly straight. Derek stared at the phone screen. I watched the color drain from his face. "Someone forged them," I continued. "Someone who knew my old handwriting but did not know about the arthritis. Someone who thought I would never notice." How many times had I watched my son lie? To teachers, to girlfriends, to his father, but never to me. Until now. "You think anyone will believe an old woman over a Harvard MBA?" His voice cracked on the last word. "I think a forensic handwriting analyst will believe the evidence. I think a judge will believe the evidence. I think your investors will believe the evidence when they learn you built their dreams on stolen signatures." Derek's hands clenched at his sides. Through the study door, I could hear the muffled sounds of his party continuing. Champagne corks, laughter, the clink of glasses raised to futures that would never arrive. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want the truth, all of it. How much did you take?" He said nothing. His silence was its own confession. I gathered my purse and walked toward the door. "I will find out anyway. I always do." Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask, are you still with me? Because this is where Vivian made her choice. Comment A if you think she helped me, or B if you believe she set another trap. Add one reason why. Please note the next part includes some fictionalized details added for emotional impact. The message behind it is what matters. I found my way to the kitchen, seeking a moment of quiet away from the performance in the living room. The catering staff had abandoned their stations, leaving half-prepared trays and the lingering smell of herbs. Vivian appeared in the doorway. She checked behind her, then slipped inside and closed the door. Her face was pale, her designer composure cracking at the edges. In her manicured hand, she clutched a small USB drive. "I found 2 more loans on his laptop," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ones you don't have in your file. The total," she swallowed, "7.2 million. All of it forged. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Vivian's hands shook the way mine did in 1976, handing forged papers to soldiers who could kill us both. The difference was, I had been saving lives. Derek had been stealing them. She pressed the USB drive into my palm. The plastic edges bit into my skin. "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving," she continued. "About the side table. About everything. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought he was just ambitious. I didn't know he was a thief." I closed my fingers around the USB drive. More evidence, more ammunition. More proof that my son had built his entire empire on my bones. "Sorry fixes nothing," I said. "But this," I held up the drive, "this might." Sometimes the person who saves you is the last one you expected. Sometimes it's the one who hurt you most. "What will you do?" Vivian asked. What I should have done the moment I found the first document. "End this." She nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I saw her clearly for the first time. Not the Instagram influencer, not the performative wife, but a 38-year-old woman who had just discovered her husband was a criminal and her marriage was a lie. "Tomorrow morning," I said, 10 o'clock. "Bring every document you can find on that laptop. Emails, spreadsheets, everything. He'll notice if I copy them tonight, while he sleeps." Vivian's eyes widened. Then something hardened in her expression, the same steel I had seen in my own reflection that morning. 10 o'clock, she agreed. I pocketed the USB drive and met her eyes one final time. An alliance I never expected, forged in a kitchen that smelled of rosemary and betrayal. Behind us, through the walls, Derek's laughter rang hollow across the party. He was still charming his investors, still selling dreams, still believing his mother was too old and confused to stop him. He had no idea that by midnight, his wife would be copying his hard drive. And by Sunday, his empire would burn. The projector hummed to life, and my son's face filled the screen, polished, confident, about to destroy himself in front of 15 witnesses. I had slipped back into the living room after my conversation with Vivian, the USB drive solid in my pocket, the taste of betrayal still bitter on my tongue. The investors had gathered in rows of folding chairs, champagne flutes in hand, ready to hear Derek's pitch. Caldwell stood near the back wall, his gray suit blending into the shadows, his eyes never leaving my son. Derek took his position at the podium like a man born to command attention. The projector cast images across the screen behind him. Architectural renderings, financial projections, glossy photographs of properties he did not own. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice warm with practiced charm. "Thank you for joining us this evening. What I'm about to share represents the culmination of 4 decades of Houston real estate excellence." He clicked to the next slide. A company logo appeared. Rose Garden Holdings, LLC. Rose Garden Holdings was built by my father, Eugene Holloway, and secured by family assets that span commercial properties across this city. Derek smiled, the same smile Eugene used to wear when closing a deal. "Tonight, I'm offering you an opportunity to join that legacy." My son stood at that podium the way his father once had, same gestures, same smile. But Eugene had sold dreams he could deliver. Derek was selling smoke. "We're projecting 18% returns within 36 months, Derek continued. "The mixed-use development in Spring Branch will break ground in January. Retail on the first 2 floors, residential above. Premium tenants already lined up." He clicked through more slides, projected revenues, construction timelines, partnership structures. The investors nodded along, their champagne forgotten, their checkbooks mentally opening. Then Derek said the words that sealed his fate. "My mother's properties alone guarantee your principal." He gestured toward me with an easy wave. "Pearl Holloway has been the backbone of Rose Garden Holdings since its founding. Her signature secures every loan, every contract, every promise we make to our partners." 15 heads turned to look at me. the confused old woman seated at the side of the room, the guarantor they had never met. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply watched my son weaponize everything Eugene and I had built, turning our legacy into collateral for his crimes. 15 investors, 15 witnesses, 15 people who would remember this night forever. Derek finished his presentation with a flourish. Projected returns, partnership tiers, investment minimums. The applause was polite but eager. Several investors were already reaching for their phones, ready to transfer funds. That was when Caldwell moved. He stepped forward from his position near the wall, his untouched champagne glass abandoned on a side table. His movement was unhurried but deliberate, drawing attention without demanding it. "If I may," he said, his voice cutting through the post-presentation murmur. Derek's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, do we have a question?" Not a question. Caldwell reached the front of the room and turned to face the investors. "A disclosure." The room went silent. I could hear the projector humming, the ice melting in abandoned glasses, my own heartbeat steady in my ears. "My name is Thornton Caldwell. I'm the Vice President of Credit Risk at First Texas Commercial Bank." He paused, letting the title register on 15 faces. "Rose Garden Holdings, LLC is currently under fraud investigation by our institution." The gasps came like a wave. Investors turned to each other, their champagne flutes trembling. Derek's face went pale under the projector's glow. That's ridiculous," Derek stammered. "Who invited you? This is a private event." "I was invited." Caldwell looked directly at me. "By the actual account holder. The woman whose signature was forged on every loan document Rose Garden Holdings submitted to our bank." Every head in the room swiveled toward me. I rose from my chair slowly, my 70-year-old bones aching, my heart breaking, my resolve absolute. I walked to the front of the room and stood beside Caldwell, facing my son across a divide that could never be crossed again. "Mom," Derek's voice cracked, "what did you do?" I had dreamed of this moment. I had not dreamed it would hurt this much. "What you forced me to do," I said. The silence stretched between us. 15 investors stared at the 70-year-old woman in the navy blouse who had just destroyed her son's empire with 8 words. Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked like a fish drowning in air. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed more time." The warehouse project would have covered everything. "There is no warehouse project," Caldwell said. "There are no permits filed. There are no contractors hired. There is only debt secured against properties you don't own, using signatures you forged." Derek's face drained white under the projector light. His hands gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The first investor stood and walked toward the door without a word. Then another, then 3 more. Within minutes, the room had emptied except for Derek, Caldwell, and me. My son stared at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. "Mom," he whispered. "Why?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Because you forgot whose name was on those documents." I had spent 43 years letting Americans underestimate me tonight. I would let them see exactly who they had been dismissing. Derek stood frozen at the podium, his face pale, his empire crumbling around him. The investors who had not yet fled lingered near the door, uncertain whether to stay or run. Caldwell waited in the shadows, his notepad ready, his eyes on me. I rose from the side table where my son had seated me on Thanksgiving. The chair scraped against the hardwood, the only sound in a room that had forgotten how to breathe. "Mom," Derek's voice cracked, "sit down. You don't understand what's happening." I walked toward him slowly, my sensible shoes quiet on the carpet. Every eye in the room followed the old Vietnamese woman in the navy blouse, the confused immigrant who couldn't navigate large gatherings, the guarantor who signed papers without reading them, the obstacle who needed to be managed. "Oh, I understand plenty. Contrai," I said, my English thick with the accent I had cultivated for decades. "My son." Derek reached for my arm. "Let me handle this. You're embarrassing yourself." I stopped at the center of the room, exactly where Derek had stood to deliver his pitch. The projector still hummed, casting his fraudulent spreadsheets across the wall behind me. I turned to face the remaining investors, 6 people who had not yet escaped, their champagne flutes abandoned, their faces frozen in confusion. Then I spoke again, but this time my voice was different. The accent fell away like a mask I had worn too long. The hesitation vanished. The broken grammar corrected itself. "My name is Pearl Holloway," I said in perfect, unaccented English. "I am the sole owner of Rose Garden Holdings, LLC. I did not authorize any of the loans my son described tonight. I did not sign any of the guarantee documents. I did not know about this company until 3 days ago. Do you know how many doors close when you speak English with an accent? I learned to use those closed doors. People say things in front of closed doors they would never say to your face." The silence in the room was absolute. One of the investors, a gray-haired man in a pinstripe suit, stepped forward, his face contorted with disbelief. "You speak English that well?" "I've spoken it for 43 years, I replied. "I just don't speak when I don't need to." I watched the realization spread across the room like a wave. The confused old woman they had dismissed, the immigrant grandmother who got tired at large gatherings, the mother Derek had seated at the servants' table, confident she would never understand what was happening around her. She had understood everything. My accent was armor, my silence was a weapon, and my son had mistaken both for weakness. "Everything my son told you tonight was a lie." I continued, my voice steady. "There is no warehouse development. There are no premium tenants. There is only debt, millions of dollars in debt, secured against properties I own, using signatures someone forged in my name." I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and held it up. "I have documentation of every fraudulent loan, bank records, forged signatures, recorded conversations. The actual evidence will be turned over to Mr. Caldwell and his fraud investigation team at First Texas Commercial Bank." Caldwell stepped forward, his presence suddenly official rather than observational. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway." Derek's hands clenched at his sides. His face had gone from pale to red, anger finally overtaking fear. "This is insane," he said, his voice rising. "She's a 70-year-old woman who barely speaks English. She doesn't understand business. She doesn't understand anything. My father built Rose Garden Holdings. I inherited it. She's just—" "I built it," I said quietly. The words stopped him cold. "Your father and I built it together. Every salon, every property, every dollar. While you were at Harvard learning to network, I was reading contracts at 3 in the morning. While you were interning at investment banks, I was negotiating leases in Vietnamese and English and sometimes Spanish. Your father may have shaken the hands, but I balanced the books. I signed the checks. I made the decisions. 43 years of watching, listening, building. 10 seconds to tear down everything my son thought he knew about his mother. And when your father died," I continued, "he left everything to me. Not you. Me. Because he knew what you would do with it. He told me on his deathbed. He will try to take it someday. Don't let him." Derek's face crumpled. For one moment, I saw the boy he had been. The child who folded towels at the salon. The teenager who had promised to make us proud. Then the moment passed, and I saw only the man who had stolen from me. The room fell completely silent. The remaining investors stared at me as if seeing a ghost, or perhaps seeing the real woman for the first time. Derek's hand trembled at his side. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words that would not come. "You planned this," he finally whispered. "From the beginning." I met his eyes, the eyes that looked so much like Eugene's, that held none of Eugene's honor. "Yes," I said, "I did." My fingers found the leather portfolio. 47 pages of evidence, each one a nail in my son's coffin, that I had hammered myself. Derek stood motionless, his confirmation of my planning still hanging in the air. The remaining investors watched from the edges of the room, uncertain whether to flee or witness the destruction. I gave them something to witness. I opened the portfolio and began to read. Loan $4.5 million secured against my commercial properties on Westheimer. Signature forged. I held up the document so the room could see. Loan $1.8 million secured against my residential holdings in the Heights. Signature forged. Another document raised. Loan 3, $900,000 Secured against Rose Garden Holdings assets, signature forged. I set the papers on the coffee table, fanning them out like evidence at a trial. Total stolen in my name, $7.2 million. The number echoed in the silent room. 7.2 million. More than most people would earn in 3 lifetimes. Taken by my own son. Using my own signature. Betting I was too old and confused to notice. Derek's desperate laughter cut through the silence. She doesn't need that money, he said, his voice rising to a pitch I had never heard before. Look at her, she's 70 years old. What's she going to do with $7 million? Buy a better nursing home. How do you explain to 15 strangers that your son thought your age made your money less yours? Raymond Fletcher stepped forward from the cluster of remaining guests. I recognized him immediately, a silver-haired estate attorney who had known Eugene for 20 years, who had helped us structure our first commercial property purchase in 1994. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. You just admitted to elder financial abuse, Raymond said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of courtroom experience. In front of multiple witnesses, including a bank fraud investigator. Derek's laughter died. He looked at Raymond, then at Caldwell, then at the other investors who remained frozen by the door. This is ridiculous, Derek said. This is my house, my family's business. She's trying to destroy everything I've built because she's confused and doesn't understand. Your house, I interrupted. I reached into the portfolio and pulled out one final document, a property deed. The official seal of Harris County embossed in the corner. 5627 Magnolia Lane, I read aloud. Purchase 2012. Title holder, Pearl Holloway. I looked at my son. You've been living rent-free in my house for 4 years, Derek. I let you stay because you were my son, because I thought you were building something. I didn't realize you were building it on my bones. 4 years. He had lived in my house for 4 years and never once asked whose name was on the deed. Derek's face contorted. That's impossible. Dad left me this house. He promised. Your father left you nothing, I said. He left everything to me. The salons, the properties, the investments, everything. Because he knew what you would do with it. Because he watched you spend money you hadn't earned and make promises you couldn't keep. Because he loved you, but he didn't trust you. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Movement caught my eye. From the hallway, a figure emerged. Small, determined, wearing the same college sweatshirt she had worn on Thanksgiving. Serena walked past her frozen father, past the stunned investors, past the evidence scattered across the coffee table. She stopped at my side. Her hand found mine, small and warm, steady despite everything. I looked down at our interlaced fingers. 3 generations of Holloway women, and only 2 of us understood what family meant. Serena, Derek breathed, his face crumpled. What are you doing? I'm sorry, Dad. Her voice was quiet but clear. But Banoy is right. You don't understand what's happening here. Your grandmother is confused. She's being manipulated. Someone is using her to. I recorded you. The word stopped Derek cold. Serena lifted her chin. Her eyes were Eugene's eyes. My eyes meeting her father's without flinching. 3 weeks ago, you were on the phone with someone from the bank. You said, her voice wavered, then steadied. You said she was old. That she didn't check accounts. That 6 more months and you'd be clear. Derek's face went gray. Banoy has the file, Serena continued, the whole recording, every word. Serena's small hand found mine. Across the room, Derek stared at his daughter, the last person he had expected to betray him. His little girl, his legacy, the future he had claimed to be building for. Serena, he whispered, you knew this whole time? I knew you were lying to her, Serena said. I knew you were stealing from her. I just didn't know how bad it was until tonight. The silence stretched between father and daughter like a wound that would never heal. I squeezed Serena's hand. She had given up her father to stand beside me. She had traded her family's peace for the truth. She was 19 years old, and she had more integrity than the Harvard MBA who had raised her. Derek looked from his daughter to his mother, his world collapsing around him. You turned my own daughter against me, he said to me. No, I replied. You did that yourself. The moment had come. The moment I had dreaded even more than I had planned for it. Derek stood frozen, staring at his daughter with something between fury and heartbreak. Serena's hand was steady in mine, her phone clutched in her other hand. The recording that would end her father's freedom sat in her palm like a grenade with the pin already pulled. I gave her a slight nod. Serena walked to the Bluetooth speaker on the console table, the same speaker Vivienne used for her Instagram live streams, for her performances of perfect family life. She connected her phone with practiced ease. The room held its breath. Then my son's voice filled the air. She's old, she doesn't check accounts. Derek's recorded voice was casual, confident, utterly without shame. 6 more months and we're clear. The investors who remained exchanged horrified glances. Caldwell raised his own phone, recording the playback as evidence. The recording continued. The signatures are close enough. She hasn't noticed in 18 months. A pause. Someone else's voice murmured a question. Then Derek again. What's she going to do? She barely speaks English. By the time she figures it out, the money will be back and she'll never know. His voice. My son's voice. Planning my destruction in the same tone he once used to tell me about his school day. Turn it off. Derek's real voice cracked through the room, desperate and raw. Turn it off. He lunged toward Serena, hand outstretched to grab the phone. But Caldwell was faster. The bank investigator stepped between father and daughter, his gray-suited body a wall of professional authority. Mr. Holloway, Caldwell said, his voice quiet but immovable. I strongly advise you not to touch that device. Derek stopped, chest heaving, eyes wild. The recording played on. She trusts me. That's the beautiful thing. She's my mother. She'll believe anything I tell her. Old people are like that, grateful for any attention. The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the remaining investors. Raymond Fletcher shook his head slowly, disgust plain on his silver-haired face. From the hallway, a sob broke the silence. Vivian stood in the doorway, her hand pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything, perhaps had been listening from the shadows all along, trying to decide whose side to take. Vivian's tears fell like the last pretense of this family silent. Unstoppable, too late to matter. Derek, she whispered through her fingers, how could you? He turned toward his wife, reaching for her. Vivian, you don't understand. I was going to fix it. I had a plan. You had a plan to steal from your mother. Her voice shattered. You had a plan to call her old and confused. You had a plan to forge her signature and take everything she built. I was desperate. The business was failing. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, I said. My voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned to look at me. The 70-year-old woman in the navy blouse, the confused immigrant grandmother, the actual owner of everything my son had tried to steal. You could have asked me for help, I continued. You could have told me the truth. You could have let me save you the way I've saved you 100 times before from bad grades, from worse girlfriends, from every mistake you've ever made. Derek's face crumpled. For one moment, I saw the boy I had loved, the child who folded towels at the salon, who fell asleep in my lap during long nights of work, who had looked at me with such complete trust. But you didn't ask, I said, my voice breaking despite everything I had promised myself. You took, and you called me old, and you thought I would never notice. Mom. His voice was a whisper now, stripped of charm, stripped of confidence, stripped of everything except the raw terror of a man watching his world collapse. I needed the money. The business was failing. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to pay it back. I looked at my son, at the man who wore his father's face and none of his father's honor. You were the best child I ever knew, I said. I don't know when you became this. The words hung in the silence, like smoke after an explosion. I was going to pay it back, Derek whispered again. And for one terrible moment, I saw the boy he had been, 8 years old, caught stealing cookies from the salon kitchen, promising to be good, promising to never do it again. Then the moment passed, and I saw only the man who had forged his dying father's signature, who had stolen millions while I sat at a servant's table, who had called me old and confused and counted on my love to blind me. No, I said, you weren't. I had won. I had lost everything that mattered. Both things were true at once. The recording ended. The room fell silent. My son stood alone in the center of the living room, his investors gone, his wife weeping, his daughter holding evidence of his crimes, his mother looking at him like a stranger, and I felt nothing but grief for the boy I had buried long before tonight. The investors fled like roaches when the lights came on, 15 cars peeling out of the driveway within 20 minutes. I stood at the window of the study and watched their taillights disappear down Magnolia Lane, taking their champagne courage and their checkbooks with them. Derek remained frozen in the living room, the echo of my words still hanging in the air between us. I had said what needed to be said. Now came the paperwork. Caldwell found me in the study a few minutes later. He closed the door quietly behind him, giving us privacy from the wreckage in the other room. Mrs. Holloway. His voice was professionally gentle. I need to explain what happens next. I sat in the leather chair that had once been Eugene's. Tell me. First Texas Commercial will freeze Rose Garden Holdings by Monday morning. The fraud investigation will proceed formally. We have more than enough evidence now. He paused. Criminal charges will be filed within the week. The words landed like stones. Criminal charges. My son. You're the victim here. Caldwell continued. No liability attaches to you. The forged signatures. The unauthorized loans. You bear no legal responsibility. The stolen funds will be recovered through Derek's personal assets, his business holdings, and various insurance bonds. How do you explain to a bank investigator that you still love the man you're sending to prison? And my son? I asked. That's for the district attorney to decide. Caldwell's eyes held something like sympathy. Given the amount involved and the evidence we have, he's looking at federal charges, wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft. A pause. Elder financial abuse. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, Caldwell was watching me with the careful patience of a man who had delivered bad news before. I'm sorry, he said. I know this isn't what you wanted. No, I agreed. But it's what he earned. A knock interrupted us. The front door. I rose and walked to the foyer, Caldwell trailing behind. Through the glass panels, I could see a familiar figure on the porch. Douglas Ashford, my estate attorney for 15 years. His silver hair immaculate even at this hour. His leather briefcase tucked under one arm with the quiet efficiency of a man who had served papers many times before. I opened the door. Mrs. Holloway. Douglas nodded once. I have the documents he requested. Derek appeared in the hallway behind me. His face was gray, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked at the attorney, then at me, then at the folder Douglas was already pulling from his briefcase. What is this? Derek's voice cracked. Douglas handed me the papers. I turned and extended them to my son. Eviction notice, I said, for 5627 Magnolia Lane. You have 30 days to vacate. The eviction notice was only paper, but paper had built my empire, and paper would end my son's. Derek took the document like it might burn him. His eyes scanned the words I had signed a week ago, while he was still planning his investor party, still believing his mother was too confused to stop him. You're really doing this? His voice was barely a whisper. After everything. You did this first, I said. I'm just cleaning up. Where am I supposed to go? I met his eyes. The eyes that looked so much like Eugene's, that held none of Eugene's honor. That's no longer my problem. Derek's hands trembled on the paper. He read it again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into mercy. They would not. I had written them myself, in the same careful handwriting I had used to build 28 nail salons and a commercial real estate portfolio worth more than my son would ever understand. 30 days. I had given him 42 years of my life, and now I was giving him 30 days to disappear from it. Mom, he started to reach for me, then stopped. I never meant for it to go this far. I just needed time. The warehouse project would have. There is no warehouse project, I said. There never was. Movement behind Derek caught my eye. Vivian stood in the hallway, 2 suitcases at her feet. Her face was pale but set. Her tears dried into something harder. Serena stood beside her, a backpack over her shoulder. "I'm taking Serena to my mother's," Vivian said. Her voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. "Don't call." Derek turned. "Vivian, please." "Don't." She picked up her suitcases. "I listened to that recording. I heard what you said about your mother. I heard what you planned to do." She shook her head slowly. "I don't know who you are anymore." She walked past him without another word. Serena followed, pausing only to squeeze my hand as she passed. Then the door closed behind them, and their car started in the driveway, and the taillights disappeared into the night like all the others. Derek stood alone in the foyer, eviction notice in hand, his wife gone, his daughter gone, his investors gone, his empire in ruins. I looked at my son, the baby I had carried, the boy I had raised, the man I had lost. 30 days, I said. Then I walked past him, gathered my purse from the study, and left the house that had always been mine. The suitcases sat by the door, but Vivian hadn't walked through it. She had walked toward me instead. I had stopped in the kitchen on my way out, needing a moment to breathe before driving home. The sink was full of champagne flutes, from the party crystal glasses that had held toasts to dreams built on stolen money. I turned on the water and began washing them, the warm stream steadying my hands. That was where Vivian found me. Meh. Her voice was small, uncertain. I had never heard her sound uncertain before. I turned off the water but did not turn around. "You should go. Serena is waiting." "I know." She stepped closer, but I needed to say something first. I dried my hands on a dish towel and finally faced her. Her makeup had smeared from crying. Her designer dress was wrinkled. She looked younger than 38, and more honest than I had ever seen her. "I'm sorry," she said, "about the side table, about the live stream, about calling you old and confused to 80,000 strangers." Her voice broke. "I didn't know what he was doing. I swear I didn't know." I studied my daughter-in-law's face, the fear, the shame, the desperate hope for forgiveness she wasn't sure she deserved. "I know you didn't know," I said. "If I thought you knew, you wouldn't be standing here. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing which doors to leave unlocked." "Where will Serena and I go?" Vivian asked. "My mother's house is small. I don't have—" She stopped, embarrassed. "I don't have anything that isn't tied to Derek's money. My house in the Heights has empty rooms," I said slowly. "Let me think about it." Her eyes widened. Hope flickered across her face like a candle in wind. "You would do that after everything." "Serena is my granddaughter," I said, "and you chose her over him. That matters." Vivian nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks again. She started to reach for me, then stopped herself, uncertain whether touch was permitted. I opened my arms. She fell into them like a child who had been lost and finally found home. I held my daughter-in-law, the Instagram influencer, the live-streaming wife, the woman who had seated me at a servant's table on Thanksgiving, and I forgave her for all of it. You think 70 years teaches you how to stop loving your children. It doesn't. It just teaches you that love and justice can share the same heart. "Go," I said, releasing her. "Take Serena to your mother's tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." Vivian wiped her eyes and nodded. She walked out of the kitchen, gathered her suitcases, and took my granddaughter into the night. I finished washing the champagne glasses, dried them, put them away. Then I walked out to the back porch. Serena was waiting for me. She sat on the steps, her backpack beside her, looking up at the Houston sky. The November air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden Derek had never tended. "I thought you left with your mother," I said. "I told her I'd catch up." Serena scooted over to make room for me. "I wanted to talk to you first." I lowered myself onto the step beside her. My 70-year-old bones protested, but I ignored them. Some things mattered more than comfort. "Are you okay, Banoy?" Serena's voice was soft. "I'm sad," I admitted, "but I'm okay." "Aren't you angry?" "Angry and okay aren't opposites. Kongai." I looked up at the stars, distant lights that had watched over me for 50 years in this country. You can hold both in the same hand. Serena was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've never heard you talk about Vietnam, about how you got here." "I never told anyone the full story," I said. "Not Eugene, not your father." "Why not?" I thought about the question. The real answer was complicated shame, survival, the immigrant's instinct to bury the past and build the future. Because I was busy building, I said finally, and because some stories hurt to tell. Will you tell me? The Houston stars looked the same as Saigon stars. I had spent 50 years under them, learning that home is not a place. Home is who stays. Serena leaned her head against my shoulder, the way Derek used to when he was small. Before Harvard, before the loans, before the forgeries, when he was just a boy who loved his mother. Tell me about Vietnam, Serena said. Tell me about the beginning. I closed my eyes. My granddaughter had earned the truth. She had betrayed her father to protect me. She had stood beside me when everyone else ran. She was 19 years old, and she had more courage than the son I had raised. I never told you about our first years here, I said. You need to know what hard looks like, so you know you can survive it. I want to know, she said, all of it. I took a breath. The night air filled my lungs, jasmine and car exhaust, and the particular sweetness of Houston in November. It started with fire, I said, and it ended with paper. Serena listened, and for the first time in 50 years, I began to tell my story. Sunday morning light fell soft through the guest room window, and my son stood in the doorway, looking like the boy I had lost somewhere along the way. I had told Serena my story until past midnight, the fire that took our village, the boat that nearly sank, the forged papers that saved us at the border. She had listened without interruption, her young face absorbing truths I had buried for 50 years. When I finally stopped talking, she had hugged me and gone to find her mother. Now it was morning, and I was packing my overnight bag to go home. Derek stood in the doorway, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from last night. His eyes were red-rimmed. He had not slept. Mom? His voice was hoarse. Can we talk? I continued folding my nightgown, placing it carefully in the bag. Talk. Will you ever forgive me? I paused, my hands still on the fabric. The question hung in the air between us. The question every broken family asks. The question that has no easy answer. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness takes time, and you haven't earned it yet. His face crumpled. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. I never meant... You never meant to get caught. I zipped the bag closed. That's different from being sorry. You cannot save your children from themselves. You can only refuse to drown with them. You're still my mother, Derek said, his voice breaking. I looked at my son, 42 years old, Harvard-educated, standing in a house he had thought was his, facing consequences he had never imagined. The boy who had folded towels at the salon, the teenager who had promised to make us proud, the man who had forged my signature and called me old. And you're still my son, I said. That's exactly why I stopped you. I picked up my bag and walked past him. He did not try to stop me. He knew better now. Downstairs. Serena and Vivian waited by the front door, their suitcases packed for the drive to Vivian's mother's house. We had agreed they would stay there for a few days while I prepared the rooms in my Houston Heights home. Ready? Serena asked. Ready. I looked at my granddaughter, 19 years old, braver than her father had ever been. Let's go home. We walked out the front door together. Behind us, Derek stood alone in the foyer of a house that had never belonged to him, holding 30 days of borrowed time. I did not look back. The drive to Houston Heights took 20 minutes. My modest house sat on Yale Street, surrounded by oak trees I had planted when Derek was still in elementary school. The garden Eugene had started before his cancer diagnosis had grown wild in my grief, but it was recovering now. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled of jasmine tea and old books. The smell of home. The smell of safety. I put the kettle on and sat in my kitchen chair while the water heated. Through the window, I could see Eugene's garden bathed in noon sunlight. The roses he had planted were blooming, despite everything. The tomatoes he had staked were heavy with fruit I had not harvested. Eugene's garden had survived 3 hurricanes, 2 droughts, and 1 widow who had forgotten to water it for a month after his funeral. Some things are harder to kill than we think. The kettle whistled. I poured the water over jasmine tea leaves and watched the steam rise. 43 years ago, I had come to this country with 2 empty hands, I had not spoken English. I had not understood American money, American banks, American dreams. I had known only work the 14-hour days, the acetone burns, the slow, patient building of something from nothing. Now I sat in my kitchen, in my house, looking out at my garden. I owned commercial properties across Houston. I had raised a son who had betrayed me and a granddaughter who had saved me. I had loved a husband who had seen our boy's weakness long before I did. I had lost my son. I had kept my soul. Some trades are not fair, but some trades are necessary. The tea cooled in my hands as afternoon light moved across Eugene's garden. Tomorrow, Serena and Vivian would arrive with their suitcases. They would fill the empty rooms I had kept closed since Eugene died. The house would have laughter in it again, and arguments, and the ordinary noise of family. Tomorrow, I would begin teaching my granddaughter how to read a contract, how to spot a lie, how to build something no one could take. I would pass down the lessons I had learned in 50 years of American survival. The same lessons I had never taught my son because I was too busy working to notice he was not learning. But today, I sat in my kitchen, in my house, in my country. I had survived worse than this. I had survived Saigon falling and boats sinking and borders that wanted to kill me. I had survived poverty and prejudice and the slow, grinding exhaustion of building an empire $1 at a time. I would survive this too. I raised my teacup to the empty chair where Eugene used to sit. "I did what you asked, old man," I said softly. I didn't let him take it. The afternoon light shifted, the tea grew cold, and Pearl Holloway sat alone in her kitchen, at peace. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 43 years building an empire with my own 2 hands, but I also spent those years so busy working that I failed to see what my own son was becoming. I trusted when I should have watched. I gave when I should have questioned. Do not make my mistake. Love your children, yes, but never stop paying attention to who they are becoming. This was more than a revenge story. This was a grandma story about learning that protecting what you built sometimes means standing against the people you built it for. I learned that being underestimated can be your greatest weapon. I learned that justice does not require anger, only patience and evidence. I believe God put me through this so I could teach my granddaughter what I never taught my son, that integrity matters more than Harvard degrees or business success. Every grandma story carries a lesson. Mine is, this trust must be earned, even by family. If this revenge story moved you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have done the same thing I did? Share this grandma story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, please subscribe and join me for the next one. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time is precious, and I am grateful you spent it with me. Please remember, some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. The message is what matters.